This is jazur. These are very, very human tendencies. This is the other reason I wanted to bring up this passage, is that this passage begins with emotions that all of us have and experiences that all of us have had. So it's not speaking about a very lofty, high-level human being that you can't even relate to. It's talking about you and me. I've been in that position for sure. I've been in the position where I'm criticized and I become completely depressed. Like, what's the point even? And sometimes I've been given pretty amazing criticism. Like I remember one of the first times I gave a talk, it was actually, I still remember, it was at St. John's MSA. I'm not hating on St. John's MSA, I'm just saying. I was give a talk and somebody came up to me, an older came up to me, shook my hand and said, "You should never speak again." It felt really bad. It was really bad. But I mean, I got over it. And then I see him once in a while and I was like, "What's up?" Still talking. But anyhow, and you have to learn to navigate criticism. So إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا is not just, by the way, it's not limited to criticism. It's about any setback in life. Any setback happens in life and you have a negative reaction, that's jazur. So first Allah says you have impulsive reactions, good or bad. And then particularly when bad things happen, you just collapse, you fall apart. And you can't deal with it. And some people have strange reactions. You know what their jaza' is? Their jaza' is they're not going to talk about it, they're going to ignore it. So their wife is telling them they have an issue, like, okay, we'll talk about this later, I'm just going to go play Assassin's Creed right now. Or we're just going to play for 4 hours until you go to sleep and then we'll pretend the problem doesn't exist. You can't face the discussion. You can't be confronted about it, right? And every time it's brought up, you just avoid the subject and you just go do something else. This is a form of jaza' also, an inability to face the problems that are in front of you. Allah says that potential exists inside some human beings. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا, interesting also. The two words in Arabic, there's manu', which means excessively forbidding, excessively denying others. In other words, you go out of your way to make sure nobody else gets what you got. You got something good coming your way, you want to make sure nobody gets even a piece of it. You want to see an example of manu', and it's not like evil people. I'm talking about just average human beings. You have siblings, right? You have siblings, and only like there's 4 brothers and sisters. And one sister found 4 cookies in the kitchen. She's got 3 other sisters, but she found 4 cookies in the kitchen. Now, it's easy math. She gets 1, the others get 1 each. But what's the first tendency? Before the other sisters see you, take a bite. If you can't finish all of them, at least take a bite or lick all of them at least. At least lick all of them. I already licked it. I'm not saying that child is evil, but that's a human tendency. That's something Allah put inside the human being. When good comes your way, you want it all to yourself, even if you don't need all to yourself. Even if it wouldn't hurt you to share. It wouldn't hurt you. You would rather get a stomach ache than give it to somebody else. And one of the favorite candy experiments I do with my children is M&Ms. Because M&Ms is a lot to go around, Like a Snickers is hard to share. And I have 6 kids, so Twix is not going to work. So M&Ms, it's economical. But then, when you're pouring and you say everybody gets 2, right? You do this tough economy, so everybody gets 2. But somebody gets 3 and they immediately clench their fist. Right? I got 3. And then everybody else wants 3 and then somebody tries to snatch 4. You know why this happens? This is actually human nature. Allah put this inside us. There's a tendency inside us to want more than our share. It's there. This is the same tendency that leads some people on Wall Street to give themselves huge bonuses, even if it means that 300 people are going to lose their job or their homes. It doesn't matter. Because that tendency, if it's not checked, if it's not put in place, can lead to high levels of corruption. Where do you think corruption comes from in government? Why do you think, these kickbacks, and in most corrupt governments, especially in the Muslim world, what is corruption always tied to? It's not about power, it's about money. It's about money. Somebody wants more than their share. The official, the representative, is having a kickback to himself and he's not letting the well get built or some infrastructure get developed because everything that comes goes outside of it into his pocket. We have politicians in the Muslim world whose names are things like Mr. 10% or Mr. 20%, etc., etc. These are the common names among the politicians. Why? Because this is the idea of whenever good comes to you, وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا, he's preventing others from getting it. And in this ayah already we have an indication that this tendency that we have is something that has to be fought. Here's a reason it has to be fought. Before Allah talks about these three ayat, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. Right before this ayah is actually the ayat of hellfire. Right before this is a commentary about people who end up in hellfire. And then Allah talks about these kinds of people. What is Allah telling us? These people had these tendencies and they lived according to those tendencies. They didn't fight those tendencies. They didn't curb those tendencies. And that is why they ended up in hellfire. And by the way, if you want to just summarize all three of these tendencies, somebody who's self-absorbed, right? Somebody who's selfish. Look at the description of this person on Judgment Day in the same surah. Allah Azza wa Jal says, يَوَدُّ الْمُجْرِمْ لَوْ يَفْتَدِي يَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْتَدِي مِنْ عَذَابِ يَوْمِئِذٍ بِبَنِيهِ. The criminal is going to wish on that day that he can ransom his child for his own life. He's going to give up his kid so he cannot burn in hell. وَأُمِّي وَصَاحِبَتِهِ وَأَخِيهِ, and his wife. It's interesting, he didn't offer his wife first, he offered his child first. You would think otherwise, right? But he offered his child first. Why? Allah is describing the extent of his greed. He doesn't even care about his child. What to mention his sahiba. And Allah didn't say, by the way, his zawja. Zawja is wife. Sahiba is the wife he was always with. He actually loved her. Zawja you could have, love, not love, it could be complicated. But a sahiba, you're always with her. Like the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam has sahaba. Sahaba, right? He doesn't just have rufaqa. He doesn't just have zumala. He doesn't just have atba'. He doesn't just have, muti'een. He doesn't have followers. He doesn't have associates, affiliates. No. He has sahaba. Sahaba means they're always with him and they love being with him. So when the wife is called sahiba, it actually means he was in love with his wife. And he always wanted to be with her. And he's ready to give her up for being saved from hellfire. And then wa akhi, and his brother. Wa fasilatihi, and his entire family, extended family. He counts his cousins by name, let him go to hell. And not just any family. Allati tu'wihi. There's cousins you hate. Like, okay, ya Allah, this one. Take him. But not that. Allati tu'wihi, the family that protected him, that sheltered him. He's offering them to go into the hellfire. And then eventually, وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, Ya Allah, you know what? I would really love to be saved from hell. If I can offer you the rest of the population of the earth, وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا, with no exception, take everybody to hell, let me go. That's how selfish this guy is on Judgment Day. And Allah describes then, but your selfishness on Judgment Day didn't just come out of nowhere. You already had selfishness in this world. You were halur, jazur, manur. You had these qualities already. And then Allah says, well then you and I are supposed to be worried because Allah didn't say kuffar have these qualities. Allah said, innal insana khuliqa halu'a. The human being has these qualities. He was created in this way. But then Allah adds, illa al-musallin, with the exception of people who pray. The exception is the people who pray. In other words, these qualities, what's the first remedy against them? Salat. Salat is supposed to make you less selfish, more considerate of others, more sharing, more caring, more patient, less reactionary, more calm, more collected. It's supposed to have a psychological impact on you and me. These are the people of Salat. Allah says when the people of Salat don't have these qualities, then the question comes, are we really making Salat? Because, we're making Salat and we still have a lot of disorders. We still have a lot of really bad reactions in life. We still really have really bad tempers. We have all of these tendencies among ourselves. Why? Because perhaps we haven't realized what it truly means to make Salat. Illa al-musallin. Salat is supposed to be this calming experience where you stand in front of Allah and you're talking to Allah. And you've heard many lectures about Salah, but I'm trying to talk about Salah in the context of this passage, what Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us here. So please try and understand the connection. When kids are misbehaving, when kids are acting selfish and the mother walks in, what's going on here? What happens to all the kids? They freeze. They behave properly. You're right, they freeze. And they're ashamed too. Sorry, mom. First they try to say, it was, and then they say sorry. Finally they admit. When you're up to no good and you have to stand and explain yourself in front of an authority, especially the loved authority like a parent or a teacher, it's embarrassing, isn't it? And when you come out of, if you were called into the teacher's office and the teacher spoke to you and said, didn't I give you many chances? Didn't we have this talk last week? Remember when I said, remember when you promised me that you won't do this again? Have you forgotten? Yeah, I remember. What do I have to do to convince you? Wait, am I not a good teacher to you? And you're like, yeah, you are. As you are walking out of that office, aren't you making a promise to yourself, I'll never let this happen again? Aren't you letting, this is so embarrassing, I'll never ever do this again. If you have an ounce of decency in you, then standing in that office and getting that thrashing is actually therapeutic. They say in Arabic, al-itabu yusaffi nufus. They say, dant peet, you know what dant peet is? Like Urdu speakers know what dant peet is, right? A scolding, it cleanses the soul, they say. The scolding cleanses the soul. That's why your parents yell at you so much. They want tazkiyatun nafs for you. Really, it's a spiritual thing for you. That's what they're trying to do. Like, brother, I want more iman. Get your parents to yell at you more. It'll increase your iman. You know? But the point here I'm trying to make is when we come to salah, we're standing in front of Allah. And if we're really standing in front of Allah consciously, then you realize the kinds of attitudes you just had. These are not the attitudes of someone who stands in front of Allah with humility. You should not have been this reactionary. It's incredible, even the act of salah, it keeps you from being reactionary. You're not supposed to look around. You're not supposed to respond to people that are talking to you. You're not supposed to you have to block everything out. You have to learn to just be in constant recognition of Allah and not let anything else influence you. And it's actually a training for your personality that even outside of salah, no matter what's happening, you don't forget Allah is watching and you have a certain restriction on what you can do. Salat is the ultimate restriction. Not you can't even look around, you can't even walk around, you can't do nothing. It's the ultimate restriction. But that restriction is supposed to train you to restrict yourself outside of salah too. That's what it's supposed to do. You know? That in salat our hearts are facing the qibla, our hearts are facing the house of Allah, and our hearts are facing, and reminding ourselves, we're standing reminding ourselves of Judgment Day, and outside we're supposed to be in that state all the time. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. And Allah says, الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ. So beautiful. Allah says these people on their salawat especially, these guys are constant. Da'imun. Young brothers, please listen up. You have a habit that I know about. I don't know who told me. I can't tell you who told me, but you have a habit. Those of you that are praying, there's a bunch of guys here that aren't praying 5 times. Or they wake up at 10 a.m. and then they think about praying, making up fajr. They wake up and they're like, yeah, I'll make it up later or whatever. And maybe they make it up, maybe they don't make it up. And there's a bunch of guys here that only come for Jummah Salat. There's those guys too. There's a bunch of guys that hang out late at night and then they're too tired to make Isha and they just go to sleep. There's a bunch of people like that. There's a bunch of people that are watching movies until like 2 in the morning and then they're not waking up for Fajr consistently, regularly. And then they wake up and it's just time to go to school or whatever. Sun's halfway up already. What's the point? I missed it. That's okay, another strike. What can you do? Just move on with life. It's no big deal. Missing salat. And then there are the people among you that do pray 5